just a quick introduction to Diana, and also while I'm doing that, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, just anything you would like to say, where you are, what the weather's like, anything else you might like to add, please do that. I think many of us probably heard of Diana. She's the author of Creating a Life Together, Practical Tools to Grow Eco-Villages and Intentional Communities, which has been translated into a whole bunch of different languages, and Finding Community, How to Join an Eco-Village or Intentional Community. And she's written many, many articles for community magazines on community topics, including an 8-part series working effectively with especially challenging behaviours and busting the myth that classic traditional consensus is good for communities. And she speaks at eco-village and co-housing conferences, and she offers consultations and leads workshops and trainings internationally. She has an ability to make these things simple and clear, and she draws on a deep and broad understanding of international community dynamics, and encourages us and supports people to effective and harmonious ways for groups to become healthy and thriving and resolve typical interpersonal challenges that can arise in any community, which is exactly what we're here for. So without any further ado, I would like to hand over to you, Diana. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. First of all, I apologize because I'm going to be having a croaky voice, a nasal voice, and coughing because I have a cold or something. And I apologize. When I cough, I turn my head away so I won't get germs on you, which just goes to show you, I think we're really, that we're really here together, you know. So if you will indulge me in having a strange voice today, I thank you. Also, Eva or Anahi, would you please make me a co-host so I can share my screen, because I have a slideshow to start us off with. There are 3 kinds of conflict in member-led groups. Now, what I have learned from over the more than 3 decades of working with intentional communities is I've learned what creates conflict in communities, and I've kind of boiled it down in my own perception to 3 different kinds that require 3 different kinds of solutions. And so I think this is absolutely true for member-led groups. Member-led groups of any kind. Excuse me. So what I mean by member-led is that the people in the group are trying to do a good thing, and they don't have a boss. They together figure out who's going to facilitate our meetings and what are we going to do, and their decision-making method is fairly egalitarian and fair, and everybody has a voice in it. And so what I have noticed over time, gosh, I'm so sorry. Maybe I should drink some water. What I've noticed over time is that member-led groups have the very, gosh, I'm beginning to get embarrassed here. I'm going to turn off the sound for just a minute.
Please don't worry on our account, Diana. We're with you. We've all been there. So don't feel embarrassed.
Thank you. Well, I won't. I'll just carry on, as the British say. Right, Eva? Okay. So I think member-led groups like the transition movement have the same things that happen in communities, except we're not all living in the same place. So I have slideshows specifically about these issues in intentional communities, and I was too ill for too long to change every slideshow to say member-led groups, so it says communities. And I ask you to indulge me in that, because I will say groups or member-led groups, but the slides will say community. Just ignore what it says there and listen to me. Okay, so let's get started. Okay. Usually the slideshow takes up the whole screen, but I can't do that when I'm on Zoom, because for some reason when when I'm on Zoom, it doesn't turn out to be able to go from one slide to the other. So I just do it the old-fashioned way. So let's get started. Okay, I think there's 3 kinds of conflict. Interpersonal conflict, which we all know and don't love. Structural conflict, and what I call especially challenging behaviors. So interpersonal conflict, here's my favorite definition. It comes from a community consultant named Laird Schaub, whom some of you may know of. He's an American communities consultant. And he says, interpersonal conflict happens when people don't agree on something, and at least one of them has an emotional charge about it. So let's say you and I were talking, and you said, hey, did you go to the picnic yesterday? Did you go to your brother's picnic? And I could say, oh, yeah, I did. It was great. Or I could say, what do you mean by that? Do you think that I don't love my brother? Do you think that I don't think my brother? I mean, I have a good relationship with him. I don't care what I told you before. Don't imply that I'm having a bad relationship with my brother. Yes, I went to the picnic. And what's your problem? Okay, so what I've just done is presumed you meant something you didn't mean. Now, have you ever seen that? I bet you have. Or it could be like this. Hi, Jack. Jack, what is it? I don't want to talk to you right now. Oh, why not? Well, because of what you said last Tuesday. Oh, what was that? I'm not talking about it. Exit stage left. Have you seen that? Bet you have. Yeah. Ooh, creepy, huh? Okay, this happens in groups, and I consider this interpersonal conflict. Like when somebody speaks harshly or brusquely and others feel hurt, or people misunderstand or misinterpret other people's motives, or when they feel dismissed, ignored, rejected, or left out. This is so darn common. So, oh, somehow my slideshow isn't quite right. Well, we might as well go here. What can we do to change what goes on? What can we do? Well, one thing we can do, one of the first things we can do is if we're using classic traditional consensus in a group, we can change to something like a modified version, like the in-street consensus method, which there will be a handout, this one here, what can go wrong with it, and a handout on how to do the in-street method. Another way to help resolve the kind of conflict that can come up when people use consensus. My point was, when you use consensus decision-making, it can absolutely create conflict, even though it's not supposed to. If you use classic traditional consensus, meaning anyone at all, at any time, when we're considering a proposal can block it. And they can say, for the good of the group. And we think, well, can you explain? No, I can't explain. Well, can you show us information or evidence that will show us why passing this proposal will hurt the group? No, I can't. It's just a feeling I have. Okay, have you seen that? I hope you have not. But if you have, ew, creepy, huh? So it helps to change the decision-making method. Kind of like if you're in a pool of dirty, stinking water and you're feeling ridiculously challenged by the bad smell and it doesn't feel good, get out of the pool. In other words, it's a good idea to use a different other decision-making method that has checks and balances built in against one person hijacking the group with their personal agenda, which does happen a lot. So I recommend, if the group wants to use consensus, using a modified version, and there's a very cool modified version that comes from the communities movement called the in-street method. Also, sociocracy, which, unlike switching from regular consensus to the in-street method, which takes 5 minutes to learn because it's so simple and easy, sociocracy is an investment of time and energy to learn how to do it. And I highly recommend it, but only for groups that can get a good teacher who can make it really clear and crystal clear and easy, like falling off a log, and who gives you all of the parts rather thoroughly and helps you practice so you can get good at it. Learning sociocracy is a little bit like learning another language. it takes a bit of learning and practicing before you can actually do it. Okay, so that's the in-street method handout, which you will get. Another is to learn really good interpersonal communication skills. And here are some. And the thing that makes me laugh about this is all very good for those who know how to do these things and who have the capacity to do these things because they feel emotionally well enough and confident and calm enough and peaceful enough that they can actually do these things. But some people cannot, as we will see. Another way, one of the best possible ways to reduce conflict in a group is to learn the nonviolent communication process. And here's a little chart of how it works, but there's so much to learn in it. I won't say anything more than this other than to highly recommend it for any group whatsoever, anywhere on the planet or any part of the universe. Okay, here's another thing that really helps resolve interpersonal conflict. It's the mini raindrops makes a flood method. Let's say that somebody whom I'll call Pat is doing and saying things in our group that are difficult. So what I would do is ask the group to learn how to do many raindrops makes a flood, which is that after the meeting, one person emails that person and says, could you please not do blah, 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 but instead do blah, blah, blah. I think it would make everything smoother in our group. And another person, a different other person, emails them also, or texts them, or DMs. I don't even know what DM means, but I know it's out there, and says, would you please not do that thing you did on Tuesday, like blah, blah, blah. And they describe it and say, I would rather that you spoke more courteously to all of us because it'll just make us do our job better. And a third person does it, and a fourth, and a fifth. If oh, I'm so sorry. If the group knows this method. Now, according to one of my community consultant friends, it only takes 3 people to make a giant difference. If it's one person, the person can say, oh, that's your problem. If it's 2 people, the person can say, oh, you 2 are ganging up on me. But if it's 3 or more, it's hard to ignore. And it's much easier to think, gosh, maybe I'm doing that. Okay, here's another one. The graduated series of consequences. This comes straight from the communities movement. And I sometimes call it the community I, but I'm going to call it the group I because you're a group, a member-led group. So here's how it works. One person talks with the person about the problem and asks them to make changes. Having a graduated series of consequences is something the group has to propose to itself and adopt, to approve the proposal and then agree to do this. And they probably have 1 or more people in a subcommittee that administers it. So imagine this is fairly organized. Gosh, I could talk yesterday. Okay, so one person talks to them about the problem and asks them to make changes. If that doesn't work, because probably it will, but if it doesn't, several people, that's the next step. Several people meet with that person, perhaps in a special private Zoom call, and ask them to please not do that and please do this instead. If that doesn't solve it, the person meets with some kind of team that the group has created to help people stay accountable to their communication agreements and behave well. If this doesn't solve it, they could. This is not the ways to do it. This is a way to do it. There's many different ways to do this, but this is one example. If this still doesn't solve it, the accountability team can create a contract of any length, I say 5 months, but any length, describing how we'd like the person to make these necessary changes and to meet with the person with updates like how you doing and hey, last Tuesday you seem to not, you've been doing fine, except last Tuesday you had that angry outburst in our meeting. So please, that's the thing we're talking to you about. Now, the purpose of this is not to punish the person and certainly not to humiliate them, but to encourage them to get more conscious of their behavior in the group and make changes. Well, the 5th one is if this doesn't work, the whole community, which means the whole group, meets to decide what action to take, which may include asking the person to leave the group. What? Leave the group? Why, that's shocking. Let's come back to that idea in a little bit. but let's go to the next one. And if that doesn't work, the group revokes the person's membership in the group and they have to leave the group. Okay, let's talk about this now, just because this can be rather controversial for people, because a lot of people think that it is unkind, cruel, and violates everything we believe in to ask somebody to leave a group that we need people in to do the work of the group. So now I have to tell you a story from Star Trek Next Generation. Are you ready for this? If you happen to know who Captain Picard is and Worf is, fine. If you don't, I'll still tell you the story. Once upon a time, there was this young woman cadet in the Starfleet, and she was like a learner. And she was brand new, and she was on the Starship Enterprise, which is a spaceship that goes around the universe. I assume you know that, but if not, that's what it is, Starship Enterprise. And so she's getting a lesson from the guy on the ship who's like the fierce and scary warrior who teaches fighting. His name is Worf. He's a Klingon. But if you don't know that, it doesn't matter. He is going to teach her some things. So he says, here is a test for you. We're going to blindfold you so you can't see anything. And we're going to give you a weapon. And I'm going to attack you from various sides. And you have to fend me off with your weapon. And I'll be attacking you with the weapon that you can't see anything. So you have to know, you have to figure out where I'm coming from. That's the test. So this girl has got this blindfold on and she's got the weapon in her hand. And all of a sudden there's this whoosh, and she leaps that way because she could hear it. And she tries to put her weapon up, but then it comes from the other side and then from behind her and then by her knees. And it's scary and horrible because she's about to get hurt badly, she thinks, and she can't see anything. Finally, she's fed up. She rips off the blindfold and said, "This is not a fair test." And Worf says, "Congratulations, you've passed the test." What she did was go to a higher level of abstraction and observe that the whole situation wasn't right. So when a group has to ask someone to leave because they simply don't seem to be able to learn or change or grow or get self-awareness or transform themselves, and they continue doing and saying things that trigger people in the group to feel awful or not even want to be in the group anymore, the work of the group benefits by asking that person to leave. I'd like to know any responses you have to that. Fleur, I'm wondering, I'm just looking at names. Do you have any response to that? You'll have to unmute your mic if it's not already muted.
I feel surprised to be asked. I imagine it's very wise to do so. That's what I can say.
Okay.
And in a next collective project, I will contribute to making such a clear policy about being included and going out.
Thank you. Gosh, that's great. Quite often people are horrified by when I suggest this. Anybody feeling kind of like, whoa, what's wrong with you? You know, we're supposed to be inclusive, include everybody. Does anyone have that view? If you want to share that, please go ahead. Angela seems to be agreeing. Galen, do you have a comment? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I certainly feel very aligned with the importance of those ideas. And I want to emphasize that it's really important to move through the graduated process well, because oftentimes interpersonal conflict can be misinterpreted as especially challenging behaviors, and especially when we do a lot of work to really understand and practice NVC principles, that can really clear up a lot of things that can transform people's behavior. So my philosophy is to do everything I can to gather the evidence that this is actually a situation where this person isn't going to be able to change before we move into that phase.
Thank you. Yes, you're speaking to the issue of complete fairness, giving the person every chance, but within a structure and a framework, not not every chance, but in no framework, but in the framework of, hey, we've got these steps, and the last step is asking you to leave, and we need you to know that now. So, okay.
That's right. Yeah, my philosophy is that it is possible for transformation in every case. Transformation is always possible. The question is capacity. Do we have the time and energy capacity? Do we have the knowledge? Do we have the practice? Do we have the science? There's a lot of people that are beyond our capacity, and we have to be able to recognize where our capacity is as a group.
Thank you. Galen and I are good friends, and we have been talking about this topic for a couple of years with each other, and we have differing views on this, because I think there's people who have issues that no amount of capacity could benefit, and Galen has a different view, and we're good friends, and so we kind of agree to disagree on this one. And if you're right, Galen, that's really a good thing. So I guess, life will show us. Okay, let's go back.
Sorry, just to be clear, it's there's a lot of people that are beyond our capacity right now, and you and I will usually agree on where that is.
Yes.
The question is, in a future time, if we had the knowledge and the practices, that's a whole different story.
Yes, like if we were in the medical bay of the Starship Enterprise, we might have a little device made of spiritual parts and vibrations and frequencies that can heal a person of their past issues, and they turn out to be like the person they would have been had they not been traumatized over and over as a child. Let's say in the Star Trek future, I always call it the Star Trek future, we might have that capacity. The average member-led group does not. They haven't got enough time. Everybody's a volunteer. The average intentional community does not. They're not professional therapists, but we're going to get to another part of this presentation called especially challenging behaviors. And when we do, this will come up again. Okay, let's go back to the slides.
Diana?
Yeah.
I saw Amanda raising hand. I don't know, Amanda, if it's something that is according to...
Yes, I
to
did
the topic.
see. Thank you. Thank you so much. Let me just, I want to do stop share, but I can't see where to do it. I used to know. How do I do a thing I've always done for years already? Stop share. Well, oh, here we go. See, I see it now. Who raised their hand? Let's hear from you. Amanda and then Fleur.
I think you may come to it later. It was just that I find this method doesn't work with some of the people I have in mind because it's not quite clear what the issue is and the particular behavior. Somebody seems to agree with you or want to talk with you and listen, but you can't necessarily say this behavior is not working for us and this one is. It's like they seem to, and then the next moment they're saying something else. So, and there's also that feeling that we want to keep people included in the group, that they are still members. It's just that they have a particular thing about power and authority and wanting to be involved and feeling that people are ignoring them. So it's like, because of their level of experience, it's a long time since they've been. So I'm just trying to fit that model to rather more vague situations where the challenging behavior sort of doesn't quite, if you try to specify it, don't do this or don't express anger like that, it doesn't ever seem to occur in quite the same form the next time.
Well, we're going to get to a very good method for dealing with especially challenging behaviors, but we're not there yet. So I'd be very curious, Amanda, what you think once we get there and you hear these new suggestions. So also, Fleur, you had something you wanted to share. No? Okay.
I was just saying, yes, you did it with the screen.
What's that?
I was just congratulating you for managing the screen.
Why, thank you. I've done this for years and I just somehow forgot where the little place was, but now I know. So here we go again. All right. So here is another thing to do. The restorative circles process. which is a part of the restorative justice movement. But it wasn't created to be a part of the restorative justice movement. It was created independently in Brazil by a British man named Dominic Barter, who was observing gangs in Brazil having wars with each other and killing people or maiming or crippling them. And it was kind of horrible. And he wanted to figure out what to do. So he learned Portuguese. He started with the kids, and he got the kids to talk to him, and they introduced him to his parents. And he and the gangs worked out a method for resolving their long-standing conflicts and heartbreaks and hatreds. Because after all, you killed my brother. And it worked out so well that it moved to Brazil's court systems. Not every one, but many of them think, oh, this works so well. And it moved to Brazil's public schools. And right now, restorative circles is a big thing in a lot of schools. There's a book about it called Restorative Circles for Schools, but it's a different way of doing it than the way I know and the way I learned. What the point of it is there's not just solving the conflict and repairing the damage, there's also restoring the relationship. And this is worth learning about. There's not time here to say much more, but there will be a handout about it in all the places you can look for the resources that I'm still putting together for you. And also a very highly recommended American Restorative Circles teacher and facilitator. She has learned, her name is Allison Ewald. And she by the way, if you have any members in Russia or Ukraine, two countries are not really available right now, but she speaks fluent Russian and Ukrainian. I think she also speaks fluent French. She's one of these people who learns languages. Hey, what's the difference between, what do you call a person who knows many languages? A polyglot. What do you call a person who knows two? You call them, I forget what you call them. What do you call a person who only knows one language? You know the answer to this. An American, that's what you call them. So she's one of those Americans who's actually broken the mold and learned bunches of other languages, which makes me very proud of her. Okay, another thing you can do is hire an outside community consultant whose specialty is in conflict resolution. This is kind of a last resort because what you want to do is not have to spend some money. And I mean an outside conflict resolution consultant who could come from the communities movement, but whose specialty is working with groups, including working on Zoom. So what I think is there's actually three kinds of conflict: interpersonal conflict, what I call structural conflict, and especially challenging behaviors. All of these kinds of conflict look the same on the surface. If you looked at them kind of on the surface, you'd think it was all just interpersonal conflict. You would think so, because that's what it feels like, looks like, walks, talks, and quacks like. So it's good to know what's underneath. Most communities or member-led groups experiencing conflict try to apply the conflict resolutions for interpersonal conflict. This really only helps interpersonal conflict. And these two methods look like interpersonal conflict on the surface, but underneath they've got a different cause. And so it's not enough to address the interpersonal conflict. So it can be very confusing for the group to try a method that works for interpersonal conflict, but it doesn't work for structural or especially challenging behaviors. So these are some things that people who have structural conflict can do. Here is what I mean by structural conflict. It means the group is missing really important, very, very important, crucial aspects of how you have a group. One would be having a shared mission for what it is we're doing and a shared vision for what is the better world we'd like to see. We'd like to see the transition movement affect every town, village, neighborhood, rural area, city neighborhood, so that people are more environmentally resilient and have more local authority, autonomy, and empowerment, both in terms of economy and in terms of shared responsibility for doing good things locally that help us be more ecologically resilient right here in our area. I imagine that's already in place in the transition movement in every single group. I'm going to skip some of these because they have to do with community and not to member-led groups, but we need a fair and participatory self-governance method. And let's talk about a membership process. Intentional communities definitely need a membership process. However, some in the US and Canada, but not the UK, who are doing co-housing, use legal entities that are themselves subject from the Canadian government and the US government's rule that says you can't say no to somebody who can buy into your community if they can pay the purchase price and meet the terms of the sale. Some communities you don't buy in exactly, or you buy into the group, but you don't own anything. So it depends on how the community is organized. But that's communities. Regarding the transition movement, I'm guessing that anybody who wants to join any committee or team in the transition movement can just join. They can just say, hey, I'd like to be in this group. And it may be that the group has strong feelings that we have to say yes to everyone, because if we do, we're being inclusive and open, and we're demonstrating with our behavior what is one of our values in the world, which is that we're open and inclusive, and we don't shun anybody, we don't keep anybody out, we don't exclude anyone. This is what a lot of intentional communities believed in their beginning days, when communities didn't have much knowledge of what worked well in other communities. I tried to remedy that by Creating a Life Together, my book about how to start communities, which is actually groups that function well really do need a membership process. This is a politically incorrect thing to say right out loud. I hope you won't throw Rotten Tomatoes at me, but if you do, they'll just hit the screen and I'll still be fine. So why do I suggest a membership process? Well, if people have an application form they fill out, and they give you references on how well they've done in previous other groups, and you ask the people that they give you as references when you email them or text them or WhatsApp them, saying something like, would you like to work with this person in a group again? And let's say you don't hear from them. That's a sign. Let's say they damn them with faint praise. Yes, that would be acceptable to me. Let's say they say, oh, I'd love to work with Jack again. He was a great contributing group member. Well, that's a really good sign. So I ask you to please consider that. It's, again, politically incorrect to say it, but it tends to work well. So please keep it in mind. Okay. Clear agreements in writing is a good idea, like communication agreements for the group. And like, here's what our purpose is. Here's what we do in this particular team of the transition movement. And we help each other stay accountable to the agreements that we make together. And we learn good process and communication skills. And if we're doing various projects to make things happen, we need effective project management skills. So what I have here is a description in my mind of the difference between interpersonal conflict on the surface and structural conflict underneath the surface. So it's, to my mind, like the ocean. The swells on the ocean at the surface are like interpersonal conflict, but underneath there can be structural conflict. So I liken that to ocean currents that are big and deep and much more profound than the swells on the surface. So when we're looking at interpersonal conflict, that's simple. When we're looking at interpersonal conflict on top of structural conflict, we need to address the interpersonal conflict with one of these good methods that we know, or one of many good methods. And we have to look, is something missing here? Are we not all on the same page about our decision-making method, about our vision? Do we have a membership process, and is it working? Or if we don't have one, fine. Have we learned good communication skills, and we encourage people to use them in our group? Okay. So here is my list for intentional communities, which I'll go through without details, about what to do to help prevent structural conflict in groups, in intentional communities. And I'm going to go pretty quickly through these slides about that because it's relevant to communities. However, some of you might be involved in intentional communities, eco-villages or co-housing, in addition to being activists in a transition movement. So I'm going to put the whole slide deck in the resources so you can look at this if you wish to at your leisure and learn from it if you like. And you can share that, of course, with anybody, because it's going to be, you know, anybody with the link can get in there. So you organize the core group, resolve the triple catch-22, which I explain later. I suggest that the initial decision-making method is something like 85% supermajority voting, not consensus, and not majority rule voting, and not sociocracy, because all those things take a while to learn, and majority rule voting has some bad downsides. But a supermajority like 85% is a real good way to get the group going until such time. Then with that supermajority, you figure out what is our vision and mission and our purpose, which I consider to be like the Holy Grail. So I have a picture of a Holy Grail. You need to have mission and purpose documents that everybody agrees on. And you use a temporary decision-making method to create 2 levels of membership, which may not make any sense with a member-led group. So I'll just pass by that. But anyway, this is for you if you want to, if you're interested in intentional communities, or you want to share this with somebody who is. Anyway, membership process, choosing your ongoing decision-making method, not that, and you get trained in it. Learning good process and communication skills, and you get trained in it. And creating agreements and policies as needed. You don't need to think about that one. Legal entities or site criteria, none of that is relevant. So we'll just go through that quickly. Anyway, just to give you a little bit of visual impact here. Work exchange programs, and so on. So that's it for resolving structural conflict or helping prevent much of it in intentional communities. Okay, now let's get to the juicy part, which is especially challenging behaviors, which is a taboo topic to talk about in the communities movement. It might also be in any kind of progressive leftist, may I say that, group that's trying to do good in the world, like help the environment, like address environmental issues, like address climate change, like address social justice issues and inequities and traditionally oppressed people in the population. The groups that want to do good things to address these issues sometimes have people in the group who have what I would call especially challenging behavior. So let's look at that. These are not your normal bad behaviors. So when I do the slideshow for big groups, I tell this story here of the young superstar who came to Earth Haven and impressed everybody, except that actually he treated some people really badly and he ended up hurting a lot of people. And that story is in the first article of my Challenging Behavior series. It's the first story in the first article. And you're going to have a link so where you can read online and download all these articles that appeared in Communities Magazine. Then there's a story of someone I'm calling Mavis. I'm not using real names at all. I'm not saying what communities they were in. Mavis had this thing going on where she would do things that hurt people's feelings and put them off and maybe scared them. And then when they would go to give her feedback, she would do it again, telling them they mustn't give her feedback and to knock it off. And that's the second story in that first article. I call it the 1-2 punch. You have to deal with her hurtful behaviors, and then you can't even tell her about it because then there's more hurtful behaviors on top of that. I'm wondering if any of you have ever experienced that in a group. You try to tell Reginald or Chloe or Susie about their behaviors, and they basically come at you like that. Another story, the third story in there, is about someone I'm calling Olive, who is aggressive in meetings and aggressive to other people, putting them down, criticize them, and speaking in kind of ways that hurt feelings, like kind of like a little sticky little little knives going at you. And yet this person has felt absolutely victimized by the whole group and by everybody in it. This person comes from a place of one down, being put down, being the victim, and yet they're the aggressor. They're not actually the victim. They might be the most powerful person in the group because they can stop the group from doing things. They can behave in such ways that some people leave the group entirely and never return. Have you ever seen that? I hope not, but it's kind of annoying, isn't it? Okay, so this is another story. This is a guy in this story, which is in the second article in the series, is about a guy in a community who wouldn't let them buy a furnace so that the building where all the families and children were in could be warm enough in the winter. This was in a country that, not the US, but a country where people had to get warm in the wintertime. And this was a very old mansion that they had purchased on this property to create their community. And this old mansion had fireplaces here and there, but it wasn't sufficient. They turned it into lots of apartments for families with children. Every year, the children had, I think I'm going to click admit if I can. Good. Every year, the children would have bad colds. They'd be coughing and sneezing, kind of like me today. And the parents really wanted to get this furnace installed. It was a special fancy new kind with little wood pellets and so on. It would cost so much money. It would really help the community. And this guy blocked it year after year after year after year, meeting after meeting after meeting. He did not want it. And I can't remember what his reasons were, but he somehow thought it was unnecessary or an expense the group shouldn't have. And when the group finally figured out that their constitution from 30 years before, because this was an older community, had this loophole that said, if people keep blocking, we can use a voting fallback. And they did use a voting fallback, and they voted to get the furnace, and they got the furnace, and now all the kids are fine in the wintertime, and everybody is much better. And this guy went crazy with anger and vengeance, and he turned the community into the local building authorities. He outed all the things they were doing that were slightly not right with zoning or building codes. He told lies to local officials that always liked this group. And the local officials were obligated to go investigate them now because they got a complaint. And he wouldn't pay his dues and fees anymore. He wouldn't pay for the food he got from the community pantry. He was doing vengeance. Ew. So have you ever seen these kind of behaviors? I'm going to stop sharing for a minute so we can see you. Have you? Confirm you're speaking language. It says I'm speaking Portuguese. Bom dia, everybody. No, I'm not. Okay. I'm not speaking Spanish either, but I know a few words. Okay, so any comments that any of you have about these kind of scary things that can happen? Anybody? Just unmute your mic and speak up. No?
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't experienced exactly those, but that kind of like relentless, ongoing grudge that just goes beyond anything that's actually happened, and it's incredibly destructive, not just because of what it does, but because of the emotional impact on other people in the groups.
Yes.
Having that kind of animosity present for a long time, and yeah, it's very, very difficult to handle.
Yes, it tends to wear down the morale of the group. It tends to drive people away. Now, who are the first people to leave the group? The most responsible, the people with the highest capacity, the people who the group really needs to get the job done, because they're not willing to put up with such crap. Okay. All right. Anahi, you had a thing you wanted to share.
Yeah. I resonate very much with what you are sharing, and remember the first sentences that, like, the groups that tend to be inclusive and want to receive everyone, when we face this type of conflicts, what in my experience is we try so hard to be nice and inclusive that the cost is so big that sometimes I believe this difficult decision of putting a strong boundary is more wise and healthy and cares the vision of the project than opening the heart once and again and feeling the pain and the frustration. So, and I agree that somehow our culture is not trained for that. So we need kind of a permission to do it, not to feel bad doing it.
I know.
Mhm.
I couldn't agree with you more. I've seen exactly that, and I address it in my article series, and I address it in the slideshow, and it's kind of like you made the slideshow because you're anticipating what's coming up. So thank you. Angela, did you just raise your hand to say something? Oh, you're just...
I was just congratulating and thanking Anna. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Galen, you had something to share?
Yeah, I just want to share how appreciative I am of the ecological lens to look at these things through, that we're learning how to steward our cultural ecosystems. And just like any other ecosystems, if there is a species, in this case, we're talking about behaviors, not people. But if there are behaviors arising in the ecosystem and the ecosystem doesn't have natural checks and balances on those behaviors become invasive and they spread. And a lot of what we're dealing with are learning processes, there's a lot of old ways of hierarchical top-down management and things that prevent those invasive species. But as we're learning to grow and develop other methods, we suddenly have all these experiences of invasive species coming in because we're still learning.
Thank you. Oh, this is great. It is like invasive species. It totally is. Okay, once again, share screen. Let's see what we got here. Okay, this story is described in the second article. Okay, now, in most groups, this is only a tiny percentage of people. There may be nobody at all in the group that does that, but there may be some sometimes. And this affects the rest of us, doesn't it? We can feel like this. Ew. If it's too relentless, to use your word, Eva, and if it's too consistent and persistent, it just drives people right out of the group. And then we end up with people who aren't as effective maybe as the others because they didn't get so disgusted they would leave. Okay, what can community members feel? I've enlisted Michelangelo and Edvard Munch to help me express this. They can feel shocked, hurt, baffled, confused, demoralized, scared, and they can stop going to meetings. And this is true of groups too, of course. Okay, so there are two kinds of this kind of behavior that I know about. Now, mental health professionals call these behaviors narcissism or narcissistic. But I have been trained in NVC, nonviolent communication, and I no longer think of people or myself as an ongoing, continuous state of being that is something. I might do narcissistic behaviors once in a while, but I'm not a narcissist, nor is anybody, in my opinion. They do behaviors we don't like, and they do behaviors that are kind of neutral, and they do behaviors that are kind of like great. And so I like to talk about the behaviors that we don't like, not the people. I like to separate out the person who's, of course, may I get metaphysical for a minute, a divine child of God, just like anybody else. It's just that they might have been pretty badly traumatized, so their behavior reflects that, and they can't quite help it. In fact, the person, I would submit to you, the person is innocent. They just do things with their mouth and their energy and their vibes and their actions that they feel compelled to do from within. Okay, let's keep going here. I like to, here we go. I've got the book in English about nonviolent communication. It's not according to NVC, NCBN, if you are in Latin America. People aren't states of being. They are people who do different things at different times. So one kind of these behaviors, and I'm not going to say narcissistic after this, I'm going to say these kind of challenging behaviors, is overt, arrogant, grandiose, entitled, entitled on the outside and insecure on the inside, but it's a secret. We're not supposed to know that. The way they behave on the outside is like that. So take a look at these people's faces. There's God, thank you, Michelangelo, telling us what to do. And there's this guy is the Lorenzo de Medici's younger brother, painted by Botticelli. And look at that face. Oh my God, is he ever arrogant? And here I've got some famous artists once again to talk about the other kind, which is covert behaviors. They're insecure on the outside, they're victimized on the outside, but inside they're arrogant and grandiose, and they know they're better than you. So the first kind of folks, they know they're better than you, and they're entitled to special treatment, and they can do things and say things that other people should not do or say, but they get the right to do it, and you're wrong and they're right, and be quiet already. And these people are constantly being victimized by you when you disagree with them or when you don't do what they tell you to do. Then they know that you have attacked them. Well, that's baloney, isn't it? But that's how it feels to them. That's how it seems to them. That's how they perceive it. And they're sincere. Now, these behaviors, this cluster of grapes is all the behaviors. And these few grapes are the fact that each person who does these behaviors tends not to do all of them, just some of them. And each person who's doing this kind of behavior might be doing a different group of all the behaviors. So it's a little tricky to observe and figure out and understand, because the people doing this kind of thing do them differently. We have a person in our community who flies into a rage very quickly, very easily, and yells at people and is fierce towards them, cannot handle any kind of criticism, and becomes crazed with rage when given feedback because it hurts them so much, more than maybe you or me. If you gave me feedback, I might think, oh, do I do that? Oh, I'm sorry. But I wouldn't yell at you and call you names, you know. When I was a little kid, I would have, but not now. And we have another person who doesn't live here anymore, but what she would do is speak with like hostility, and it was like a snake going and getting you when you didn't know what was going to happen. And people in a meeting might think, what just happened? Everybody feels terrible, but they don't quite know what the person did. It might have been passive aggressive behavior or implications or something. Okay, why are people in member-led groups especially vulnerable to this? Well, because of the culture of the group, which is that we include everybody, right? And which is we always give people a second chance and a third one and a fifth one and an 18th one and a 34th chance. Because after all, we're spiritually oriented. We care about the earth. We have self-awareness. We're like, perhaps, you know, we do a lot of personal healing work and inner work. Possibly we meditate or are highly spiritual, or we think we are. And we can't admit to ourselves that we might have a bad problem that maybe can't be solved with the capacity that we have in this group. So I think that a member-led group is like the perfect petri dish to grow these behaviors and to not check them. And some people believe that just living in community or being in a member-led group that's doing a way cool thing is itself going to heal this up. With enough hugs, you can heal anything. This applies to communities, but maybe not to your group, because perhaps none of you have been in the same place at the same time. So let's just extend empathy to them and use nonviolent communication. With enough nonviolent communication, we can heal anything. Not true. Marshall Rosenberg, not true. And in fact, he says so in chapter 7 or something. We can get an outside communities consultant, because an outside communities consultant or an outside group conflict consultant is going to heal it, right? No. With enough outside consultants, you can heal anything. Not true. Not true. What's another reason? Habituation. Oh, that's just the way Reginald is. Oh, that's just the way Hildegard is. I always say Reginald and Hildegard in the US because we don't have those names here. But when I talk to people in England or Canada, there's loads of Reginalds there. And also there's Hildegard in Germany and probably also Austria. So I ask your indulgence for saying names of real people you might know. So there's 3 things we can do. We can protect ourselves as individuals in the group. There's things group of friends together can do, and whole groups can do it. So here's what doesn't work. just being in the group, using nonviolent communication, having deep and heartfelt conversations with the person, sending long private emails. Oops, I got ahead of myself here. Sharing circles and talking stick circles and wisdom circles, and we'll just talk about it in the group and that'll heal it. No, it doesn't. Conflict resolution methods like restorative circles, which I highly recommend, it doesn't touch it. So these things just don't work. With a person who has this level of what I assume is childhood trauma, there's really nothing you can do other than the things I'm going to show you in a subsequent slideshow. So we need to be both kind and realistic. Both kind and realistic. So let me stop sharing for just a minute and see if you have any responses to that, what responses you might have. Zaida.
Hi, Diana. Thank you so much. Your book has resolved so many issues in our community, and we have been carrying it for 20 years under our arms, even though it never gets old. So
you have a book in Spanish?
No, because we lived in the United States. We're friends of Laird and the FIC people, and we were there, but we translated all here. It's so perfect. But what I wanted to say is that when you got to this level of the conversation here, if we call it a conversation, but of the teachings, of the awareness that you're bringing, it shifts everything. Because I live in a spiritual community, and that is the point that is really challenging, because we are all into the spirituality, but when it comes to difficult behaviors, it's so difficult to go into restorative justice, to understand. And I always thought about this related to narcissism. I was like, I don't think this person is narcissistic. I think they have traces of it, because we all have traces of something related to our traumas. So right. I just wanted to say that I feel that this is so important, because especially us from the group of inner transition, we know this to be the base ground of everything. And I think that we're starting to talk deeply and for the future, away from rules that sometimes seems that they come from North America. And I say this because I've lived in both countries, and I know how difficult it is to our community. We could never come here and say, now we're going to do a membership established, accordance. We cannot say it this way. If it sounds too bureaucratical and too formal, it doesn't happen sometimes. But we find ways to. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Zada. I was just wondering, what spiritual community is it, and in which country? I'm curious.
It's Brazil. I'm in Brazil, and is in the south of Brazil, São Paulo. And it's a yoga, meditation, and ayahuasca community that, the base ground is the spirituality, but it has 50 people together. But what I wanted to say is that this is the point that needs awareness. That's what I feel, that it's where we really go to a turning point, and how to manage that, because then this is the point. So I just wanted to comment that. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. I think Fleur or maybe Angela had their hand up.
Yes, I wanted to tell you a story. I was a democratic school leader. I've been creating this school and organizing for 8 years. And in the school, there were 2 boys. There were 10. And for 2 years, we did all what we could to just make to allow them to stay in the school.
Yes.
And it's been really hard for the team and really hard for the other children, because these children were violent. And we finally learned that it's not possible to welcome everybody in such a school. And even if they are children, it is sad. At the same time, it's realistic. Yeah.
Thank you. What you're saying totally makes this point. I can see that Angela agrees, and I think I've seen people nodding their heads. Quite often a group spends some time, which might be a couple of months, a couple of years, a decade, trying to do exactly as you have said, Fleur. Well, we can work with this. we welcome everybody. We're a diverse group. We're, spiritually oriented, I'm assuming, and very progressive. And it takes a while before people go, oh my God, this isn't working at all. So there's an expression in American English called being fed up. I expect that's an expression in the UK too. And like up to here means being fed up. My experience, a community or a member-led group has to be up to here before they'll make a change. And so for your school, Fleur, it took 2 years before people started to go, wait a minute, maybe we should do like in Star Trek, rip off the blindfold and say, hey, this is an unfair test, Worf. The whole point being, if we lift ourselves into a higher level of abstraction and actually look at our belief that we can include anybody and everybody, and with enough hugs or with enough NVC or with enough blah, 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 everything will be okay. And my point in this presentation is that works a lot of the time, but not every time. With folks like this, it tends not to at all. So now I'm going to go back to the slideshow. Oh, wait, Galen.
Yeah, I wanted to take a moment to really plug for NVC, because in my understanding of NVC is that the philosophy that Marshall Rosenberg teaches incorporates the wisdom that you're talking about, that if somebody is using NVC properly, then there is a moment, there is a time we need to shift into protective NVC.
Right.
That is, there's never a time in any conflict to stray from the philosophy of NVC. There is a time to stop trying to do these are my observations, these are my feelings, these are my needs. But that, in my mind, that's not just NVC. NVC is the entire philosophy of how to approach conflict. And sometimes there is a need for protective use of force. And Marshall Rosenberg teaches that very strongly.
Yes. Yes. When I read that in his book, when I was having my whole life change forever, back in 1998, when I was learning NVC, I thought, oh my God, this was so helpful. And yet there's this point at which using NVC in your way of speaking, you ask the person to leave, but you do it with, feelings and needs and so on, observations.
Exactly.
Okay, back to...
And without intention to punish, as you mentioned earlier.
Right.
Never,
It's not
never
about...
a cause for punishment.
Right. Oh, let's go to Anahi.
Oh,
Were you saying this, or were you wanting to talk?
I'm celebrating Galen's on non-punishing, and I see that Eva probably is wanting to suggest a break, Diana. If possible,
yes.
we have, because we're on a bit more than the hour.
Yes, you're right. I actually lost my place in my mind. I always like to take a break after we've had an hour. So thank you for reminding. Let's take a 5-minute break. It's not much. We have a lot to go through in the next hour. 5 minutes is not enough to go make yourself a sandwich. It's enough to go use the facilities, the washroom. It's enough to feed the cat, but then you have to come right back, okay? See you soon. Screen share again.
We'll need to start the recording again.
Oh, yes. I didn't realize it was off. So if Ava could, okay. So what we need, what we need is compassion as well as realism to deal with this. So let's just take a look. We talked about mini raindrops make a, oh God, my voice is happening again. Give me a sec, please. Okay, I'm going to mute my mic and cough a whole lot. All right, okay. Many raindrops make a flood. The method of one person and another person and another person, giving the person feedback in a courteous, gentle way. Why is it called mini raindrops? Well, because the drops themselves, each piece of feedback is courteous and gentle. Like a little drop, drip, drip. But you've heard of Chinese water torture, right? You're laying on the ground, you're tied down, and a little drip goes on your forehead. After a while, the drip goes through your head. And this is how you've been tortured to death. Terrible thing. And I do not suggest that we torture anybody. I just suggest that the same principle applies. Hearing enough little gentle drops of feedback and requests for change can trigger the person who is doing these behaviors to not stop doing them, but to leave the group. When it's somebody just doing plain old interpersonal conflict, it doesn't trigger them to leave the group. We just work it out. But if the person is like the people who cannot tolerate feedback because they believe they've been viciously attacked by not being agreed with or by not being, doing what they tell you to do, then it really helps to do many raindrops make a flood. Another thing to do is the community I, which you already saw. And so I'm going to skip to the next thing. We set limits and boundaries on the person's behavior, but not the person themselves. I have another slideshow to show you, which is all about what we can do. Just give me a sec to see if I have the right one here. Okay, that's not it. All right, just give me a sec here. Oh, somehow I lost them all. Okay, if you'll give me a moment to okay, here we go. Sorry about that. Okay, what can we do? So this slideshow is about what individuals can do, what groups of friends can do, and what whole organizations can do, or a whole bunch of people in a team like the intertransition team. And this, of course, the intertransition team can share any of this at any time with all the other teams in the transition movement. Okay, so as we looked at last time, a bunch of things that work normally do not. We have to be compassionate and realistic. So here's 6 ways we can protect our group. Learn as much about these behaviors as we can. Lower our expectations of their behavior so that we don't expect them that this time maybe they'll turn into a nice person, because they can't. Make all communications with them public as compared to on private emails. We'll talk more about each of these things as we go along.
Diana,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt, but could you make a bit bigger so we can read the slide, please?
Yes, I'm so sorry. Let me see what I can do here. It looks to me like my writing got smaller because
Perfect. There is perfect. Yeah.
sometimes PowerPoints change themselves on you when you didn't want them to, and that's what happened. So here we go. Thank you for saying that. Oh, shoot. What happened? Oh, no. Oh, I see what happened. Okay, here we go. Another thing is to use the inner ninja technique. What the heck is that? This is my name for a metaphysical and spiritual technique that I learned years ago, and we'll come back to it. And it's very effective in helping yourself stay calm and in not getting highly upset by what they're doing when they're doing a thing toward you. It's a way to stay calm and not get affected. It really works too. And set limits and boundaries, which is what we're going to talk about now. Okay, where are we? Okay, so we're going to look at each of these in turn. We need to learn as much about what psychologists call narcissism as we can, so that we have enough information to lower our expectations, because we might not want to lower them. Just like for 2 years in Flora's school, people didn't want to think that those boys might not ever change. And in various other communities and groups, this has happened. Okay, so here's so all I know is books in English. Some of these have been translated to other languages, though. Don't You Know Who I Am is a really good book about it. And Rethinking Narcissism, these are available on Amazon. And this is Dr. Ramani Durvasula, who has a YouTube channel. And this is Dr. Malkin, who wrote the other book that I recommended, Rethinking Narcissism. They both have YouTube channels. And this fellow down here, Abdul Saad, or probably Saeed, he is in Sydney, Australia. He has a really good YouTube channel. A person can learn all about this stuff by doing the dishes and just listening. Or they're sweeping the floor, or they're cooking dinner, or they're doing some kind of thing where it doesn't require them to focus a whole lot, and they can just listen to the YouTube videos. So I suggest that the best one is the video called Oprah's 12 Most Frequently Asked Questions on Narcissism with Dr. Malkin. You can just type that in to the YouTube channel. So here is what you will learn about people with these behaviors if you start reading about it. They had a lot of trauma as children. They didn't get enough empathy. That can lead to these behaviors in adults. The child can't develop enough empathy to grow into a cooperative, caring adult, which leads to a lot of rage as an adult, which can be suppressed inside of them or right on the surface. The person has an unconscious belief, but you'll never know they do, that they're actually worthless and defective. And to compensate from secretly feeling, not that they know it consciously, that they're actually defective, they develop a false persona of arrogance, grandiosity, self-centeredness, entitlement, resentment. Have you seen any recent American presidents do that? Huh, perhaps I shouldn't say such a thing. On the other hand, oh my God, it's so obvious, isn't it? Okay, what else? They live with the unrelenting inner dread that others will somehow see that they are actually worthless, but they're not consciously aware of this. So like that's just compelling them all the time, but they don't know it. They innocently don't know it. So once again, we got to get realistic. That rock means being realistic. Well, we're also compassionate and understanding. Okay. Their especially challenging behaviors happen whenever they feel threatened. And the more threatened they feel, the more intense their behaviors. And they feel threatened often. They are, in fact, easily threatened, easily triggered. The threatened by things that most of us would think, well, that's not threatening. For example, when somebody expresses an opinion different from theirs or otherwise disagreed with them, they can feel it, perceive it as, terrible attack. You attacked me. No, I didn't. I just disagreed. Somebody can give them feedback courteously, even very courteously, and it feels like an attack and they're upset. Somebody doesn't do what they tell them to do and disobeys them, which cracks me up, and it's also pretty painful. In the first article in the article series, which you will have access to, I describe this, where this woman had a work exchanger in our community. She's no longer here, so I can say this right out loud. And the work exchanger couldn't do everything that she was asked to do because she had a bad back and couldn't lift this heavy mattress with herself. And the woman who had these behaviors, who was her boss in this work exchange arrangement, said, "You're being disobedient." And she was talking to a woman who was older than her, a professional in her life, her whole life, and she was a volunteer. And so that struck me as quite an astonishing thing to say, but it's the kind of thing a person like this might say. The next thing we can do is lower our expectations that the person who does this will ever change or feel empathy or understanding or concern for the needs of others. If we learn more about it, we can develop realistic expectations about what they can do and not do. We can stop hoping they will respond to requests for empathy, cooperation, and reciprocation, and quit expecting that this time they'll care about us. This time they'll be able to change. This time they'll want to change. When we learn to work effectively with them, we can still be effective by staying within compassion and kindness. And here's what Dr. Ramani says: manage expectations, maintain boundaries, shore up your other supports, connect with other friends, recognize that they will not change, take care of yourself, don't engage with them, and get mental health assistance. For who? For you. So you can deal with it better, to get more emotional resilience. Okay, let's talk about making all communications public. What a good idea. Now, since you are all knowing each other through Zoom meetings, this would be when somebody wants to email you and tell you, you don't reply right away. Instead, you get one or more people also from the group, and you email in reply, and you CC those other people and say to the person, Reginald, I'm also including Susie and George and Conchita in our message here, so that we aren't just you and me talking. And the person who treat other people badly in private tend to not treat people as badly when it's public, because they're a little embarrassed to have it be so obvious what they're doing. So using a speakerphone for phone calls, or a speaker part of your cell phone, CC others in emails. Okay, now let's talk about the inner ninja technique. This is so spiritual and metaphysical that I have been afraid to describe it in my article series, but I'm going to tell you. And here's how it works, and I'm going to show you myself here. All right. So how you do it is you look at the person you're talking to, and you look right here at them. You don't look here, 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 here. And you for sure don't look into their eyes. No, no, no. Don't let them get their eyes in you. Don't let you look in their eyes. This kind of makes a window between your two consciousnesses to look at their eyes. And their impact on you can be so much worse if they see your eyes. But if you look at them right here, two things happen. 1, 3, you're not looking in their eyes, but it looks like you are, unless you're really close to them. But if you're at usual conversation distance, what happens is they just perceive you as courteously looking and listening. The second thing that happens is something happens to you. I don't know why. If you're looking at somebody else here, it does something to you, even though you're looking over there at them. It's some kind of spiritual, metaphysical process that I do not understand. Nevertheless, it works. And I have a handout exactly about how to do it, with little pictures and everything in the resource place. Oh, by the way, the resource place is not my website. It's a Google Drive folder that you will get the link to from Eva pretty soon. I just am still fixing it because I was too ill to get it all together before this class. So it's all half together, and I'll make it very wonderful for you. By the time you get the link, you'll say, oh, great. And then there's way more resources than this little quick 2-hour presentation can do. And you could just go scroll through the resources and see what you think, and grab them and take them and share them with anybody. Okay. So when you look at a person like this, and it goes over to some kind of energy is going from you to their place on the forehead. Yeah, okay, the third eye. I guess that's what it is. I don't like to say spiritual and metaphysical things publicly, but on the other hand, I'm about as new agey as you can get. I just like to hide it, so I can be taken a little bit more seriously by like more mainstream people. But I don't think any of us is mainstream. We're probably trying to change the world, and therefore we've got the stuff. Okay, so what happens is, when that person is sending energy at you, and energy is a real thing, and you really can feel it, and it really can affect you, or when they're saying mean things or harsh things or abrupt things or passive aggressive things like that snake, what just happened? When they're doing either of those things and you're looking at them here and you're not letting them look in your eyes or look in theirs, oddly enough, you feel really calm. You feel impervious, like a rock. And the wind is going by the rock, or the waves are going by the rock, but you remain a rock of calmness. And you're fine. This is astonishing. How does this work? I don't know. I learned it from a spiritual teacher once a long time ago, and I'm not sure where he learned it. He thinks it comes from the ancient Sufis, and he told me that it predated the Sufis, and it predated Islam, and it's from Venus. That's what he told me. Well, new agey things. I don't care where it's from or where we think it's from. It could be from Mercury or Venus or Mars or the Delta Quadrant of the universe. If it works, let's grab it. So multiple times I have been treated like that by someone that I know. And when I remember to do it, I just go look at them right there. And instead of getting triggered, like I have a tendency to do, like I have a tendency to get really upset, I just remain calm. And I can hardly recognize myself because I'm like this easily triggered person. But as it turns out, when I do that, I just look at them. And after they're done, I just say something like, okay, thanks for the feedback or something. And I'm fine. And so could you be. You put a sun on the, or some kind of round thing, Eva. Did you want to comment? Okay.
No, I was just referring to the planetary conversation.
Right. Okay. Here we go. All right. The internet ninja technique has to do with looking right there at that person in their forehead. If they have bangs like I do, you just look at the same place anyway. Okay, here we go. Setting limits and boundaries. These boundaries are actually, I should say, with the behavior. I don't mean with the person. Okay, so here's a book about it. 4 ways, forgive me here, 4 ways we can protect ourselves. Oh, I'm sorry that this is a little out of alignment. One is what I call the quiet way or the chicken way. When I had a terrible situation with somebody here at Earth Haven, the one I mentioned who wants people to obey her, she was very hostile and resentful and tended to disrupt our meetings big time. And she particularly hated me because she had a sort of a vendetta thing going on with me. What had I done to cause that? I sometimes spoke up to her and said, gee, I wish you wouldn't behave like that. Would you please not talk like that? I would say things like that. And it was like, no forgiveness. That was like the worst thing I could have done. And she knew that I was attacking her badly. So we had this one-way hatred going on. And the quiet way, I live in a very large community, and the quiet way was I just stayed out of her way. I never sat at the same table with her at a community meal. I didn't go to small groups where she would be. In our big circles of meetings in the community, I would sit in such a way that she wasn't opposite me in the circle. I'd sit a few people away from her. Therefore, she'd have to go like this to see me, and she didn't. So she didn't look at me. I didn't look at her. And if I happened to pass her somewhere, I'd say hello and keep going. Because I didn't want to hurt her feelings. I didn't want to be discourteous. I just wanted to protect myself. But I call it the chicken way because I never said a word to her. I didn't do anything like what people who talk about setting limits and boundaries usually do. I didn't do that. We can tell the person what we think is their unacceptable behavior when they're with us and ask them not to do that anymore. And we can tell them, let me see if I can fix this. We can tell them what we'll do if they keep on doing the behaviors. And what we'll do is a consequence, but it's not mean. It's just that maybe we'll leave the meeting or we'll stop having the conversation. If they do it anyway, we can just remind them of our boundaries. This is setting boundaries and protecting them. To do this, we need to be assertive, which we might not be naturally. So here's Brene Brown, who says, daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves when we are risking disappointing or pissing off others. The other thing to do is really counterintuitive. It's to get outside healing help. For them, no, because they're not going to do that for oneself. Wait, why should I get outside healing help for me? They're the one doing the behaviors. They ought to get the therapy or whatever it is. Well, oddly enough, I've experienced this and some others too. If I get help from myself, from an outside source like a shaman, trauma healing specialist, a spiritual healer, a psychotherapist, I actually work with a spiritually oriented, clairvoyant psychic healer who does work that's like shamanistic, removing old issues from you, and then your soul force moves back in. And now I'm feeling about 100 times happier than I used to, and kind of grateful and cheerful most of the time, whereas I used to be an easily triggered person, and now I'm not so much. And so I got help for me, which didn't change anybody that I was having these experiences with, but it made me much better able to handle it. And so this is just something you can read in the article series. What Rose said with this guy, Dwight, he was the guy that was doing mean things to people. She said, she wrote him an email. I don't understand you. He was her best friend, and she finally got disillusioned. I don't understand you anymore, and I don't think you understand me either. I want us to stop having any personal interactions, meaning here in the community, and to not talk on the phone or visit each other anymore. From now on, let's just email only about community business. And so one of the things about setting a boundary is to recognize that we even have them. And there's this thought, wait, doesn't having a boundary violate our group's ideals and our values? Aren't boundaries barriers to good connections with other people? So then this is a story about how this other guy, and here's what the email he said. And why don't you just read it? I won't read it out loud so we can save some time. So what Joseph did with this guy that these aren't their real names, was to put an email out to the whole group saying, please don't do these things anymore. These are specific things I don't want you to do toward me. And if you do, I will leave, and everyone will know that I left for this reason. So please don't do it. What this is a boundary. If you do this, I will do that. So won't we be rejected by them? Aren't we being selfish? Isn't this being controlling? No, we're defending our boundaries. And in my opinion, we don't need permission from someone else to defend our boundaries. We are stating what we do, the consequences. So let's see. So Joseph had to set more boundaries with Eldred 10 years later because Eldred carried this grudge for 10 years. This is a real thing that really did happen. Okay, so why don't you read this one too? So Joseph had been willing to receive emails from Eldred, but when Eldred sent Joseph an email saying, I still can't get over how horrible you were to the community and how much you hurt our whole community and what a hurtful person you are. And every time I drive past your house, which is on my way to my house, I just feel horrible. And I think we should have another mediation. And because you just won't get it how bad you were. Now, what Joseph had done was he pointed out to the community that that not paying federal income taxes could get him into trouble with the Internal Revenue Service here in the U.S. And there could be, bad consequences for the community. He was a CPA, a certified public accountant, and he knew about finances, whereas the community was a bunch of nice people who didn't know about finances, but they knew how to meditate, if you know what I'm saying. And so he pointed out a thing that they were doing, and it was shocking and horrifying to some of the older members of the community who had founded it, because they didn't want to have no damn connection with the U.S. government, damn it all. They were just like better than that, like they were new age spiritual people, and the U.S. government's a bad organization that hurts people. So no, we're not having no connection with the damn government. Yeah, but you have to pay your taxes. Well, we don't want to. This and this and this could happen. No, it couldn't. We're very spiritual. So what happened was that when Joseph 10 years previously set it up that the community got it, that they needed to actually follow the laws that they were embedded in and subject to, no matter how spiritual they were, then this shocked and stunned Eldred, and he never forgave Joseph for doing this very bad thing to the community. And so that's how Joseph responded, which was to not address the issue. See, they'd had about 3 mediations 10 years ago and nothing changed, it just didn't work at all. Okay. We need to defend our boundaries. We don't owe the person an explanation for why we have the boundaries. Why are you saying this to me? You don't owe them an explanation. These are my boundaries. Our boundaries need no one's approval. Let's emphasize that. We can set them, and we don't have to explain ourselves. Well, here we are. Okay, and here's Brene Brown again. I'm not sure if you know who she is. She's sort of famous and has written books and has YouTubes about how to be vulnerable in front of others. Compassionate people ask for what they need. They say no when they need to, and when they say yes, they mean it. They are compassionate because their boundaries keep them out of resentment. So again, here's the 6 things we can do. And here's how groups of friends can help each other. But I'm going to skip over that because it applies more to communities, though you'll see it when you look at the slideshow. Of course, we can do mini raindrops. We can create petitions and alliances to ask the person to stop doing these things. Some people in my community started a petition, and before the petition got to the administrative group who was trying to deal with this, who was failing to deal with this issue, the administrative group got word that there was a petition happening, and they did what the group had wanted, which was to remove this person who was treating people badly from the administrative team. So petitions can help very much. It's kind of unusual. If you're in a Zoom connected group like Inner Transitions, it would require outside of the meeting someone starting an email to various people, but not including the one who was being requested to not do those behaviors, please. And then they give them the petition, but not publicly in the group. That would be perhaps embarrassing for them, but privately. What can a whole group do? Set limits and boundaries, do the graduated series of consequences, the community I, we know that one already. We can switch our decision-making method to sociocracy or the in-street method or some kind of modified method. I'll pass by this. You can look at it later. This is just a little bit about sociocracy, which I teach. I'm teaching it in July, part 1, and in October, part 2. And I'm doing it in the middle of the day so that people in Europe and the UK will have it in the evening if they want to take it. Okay, some benefits of sociocracy, but I'm just going to skip by this so we can get back to us talking to each other. Do most communities do these things? No, they don't. Most groups do not do it. Fleur, as you know, took your school 2 years for the folks to think maybe they should do something. So why isn't it? It takes assertiveness. People may feel shy. They might fear rejection or social capital in the group if they speak up. There might be retaliation by the person, and there will be. So if they're assertive, they might be afraid to propose this to the group because somebody will block it. Why does that person block it? Okay, here we have the Cartman drama triangle, which comes from a psychologist named Cartman back in the 60s. He says quite often in conflict, there's a rescuer, a persecutor, and a victim. And the people leap into these roles, and the person who is the rescuer feels a compulsive need to rescue that person there, and a compulsive need to rescue that person there. So some of us are giving that person some needed feedback and requesting changes. And then along comes, I'll call her Agnes. It's a name that I think is uncommon. Agnes comes along and forbids us to do it. If we make a proposal to our group to change things and to ask this person not to do that, Agnes will block it or stop it. Why? Because she doesn't want the person to feel bad. She doesn't want them to have hurt feelings. That might hurt their feelings. Yeah, we'll hurt their feelings. And here's just some more pictures of this. I cannot remember why I put the snail in here, but it's a cute snail, right? Okay. We can create a mutual support network. We could do many raindrops make a flood. We can create alliances and petitions. I think that's basically the end of it. Yeah, it is. Anyway, now we've got some time to talk with each other about these ideas. Since I'm seeing this, I think some of you might like these ideas. Does anyone have any comment about any of this? Many raindrops make a flood, getting outside healing help for ourselves, setting limits and boundaries, and so on. Amanda.
Yes,
Amanda Nahi.
I'm just thinking of the type of person who wants to keep meeting with the people that she perceives as being the ones with power in the group, and why aren't we listening to her and not taking her seriously? And then it goes away and then it comes back, and then old hurts get recycled, apparently, once a meeting. And you want to, apparently this person wants to be listened to. So torn between putting energy elsewhere, sort of, and not taking it too strongly, but wondering whether, if one had such a meeting and that person had a chance to say what they mean to say, you've done what they've asked, but you don't sort of get drawn in further. Is that going to be useful? And the other is, how can you not do a fixing, I can heal them, but leave a door open that, or find the perspective that says they might be able to heal from their trauma, not to go, well, they're always going to be like that because that's what I've seen all the time, and these patterns repeat and it's difficult behavior, but go, what if this type of person could heal? I don't know how they might heal, but is there anything I can do in the way we set up our interactions that allow for that possibility for them? And it might be stepping outside, going elsewhere, but it might be just suddenly having a switch because you, I don't
know. Let me answer your second question first, and then if you could remind me the first question, because each question was sort of long and I couldn't hold it all in my brain. So regarding let's hold open the possibility they can change. I can see why you'd want to do that, because it's kind and it's compassionate, and you're probably a person with a big heart, and probably the people you know that you work with in groups have big hearts and want to give people a chance. I think that does work absolutely with most forms of interpersonal conflict, but I do not think it works with this kind. So how do you draw the line? How do you know? You don't know. You just have to see what does or doesn't work. Now, let's say we're in the Star Trek future and we're in a group and there are technologies possibly dealing with frequencies and brainwave transformational frequencies, where a person with deep and horrible trauma can be healed without them having to go get therapy. And which case, yeah, by all means. But what we currently, a bug was flying at me. What we currently have is a situation where psychotherapists will say, and they do say this, people with this, they call it narcissism, cannot heal. First of all, they're not going to want to get therapy. And when they're ordered by the court to get therapy because they've done some kind of criminal behavior, or it's a mediation because they're getting divorced and there's this one last chance, well, if you'll go get outside healing help with a psychotherapist. Most people go to a psychotherapist, whereas I go to like clairvoyants who do healing and such, but the average person would go to a psychotherapist, I think. Well, the psychotherapist's view across the board about this is it just doesn't work. They cannot change. They don't want to change because they're pretty convinced that it's those other people's fault and that they're blameless. So usually psychotherapists do not work with people who have these behaviors. They work with the people affected by them, like the sister, the brother, the child, the adult child of somebody, or one or two parents who are like this. But most frequently, it's with people who are in a romantic relationship or are married to someone who has this. Here's what I have learned about that. A happy, cheerful, sunny person who feels grateful and confident and has goodwill in them attracts a very, very charming person who woos them incessantly, which is called love bombing in this field, to where they feel so happy to be with this person and they get married or they become partners. And then slowly over the years, or the months or the years, the person who has these behaviors erodes the confidence and the well-being of the person who's with them, because secretly they have a secret desire which is unknown to them. That is to say, it's suppressed and not available to their conscious awareness, that they need to destroy the happiness of that person. Because that happiness of that person is a slap in their face. How dare you be so happy? You think you're so great, you're not. And so the person slowly, this is often what happens with women who are with husbands who do this kind of thing. It can work the other way too. Women can do this with men, but it's less likely, it's less frequent. And so this woman slowly becomes a shadow of her former self. She doesn't see her parents or her sister anymore. She doesn't see her friends anymore. Why? He won't let her. He controls her. He's very controlling. She becomes afraid of him. And she keeps trying over and over and over and over and over, month after month, year after year, to please him, sometimes decade after decade. Finally, she gets therapy and finds out, oh, it wasn't me. I wasn't the cause of this, because he, usually it's a he, has led her to believe that she is the problem. Oh God, this is so awful. So these books that I've been suggesting really go into this. So I do not think that keeping open the possibility that they might change will actually help the group, though I can absolutely see why you'd want to. And I think it might work really well in the future when we have those Star Trek technologies. But right now, I think we don't.
I don't think it's as extreme. The thing is, I don't think it's as extreme as the example you gave. It's more that the person can't quite see what they do, and we, the organisers, see it, but don't know how to speak kindly with them, yet sort of like, we know that we're not the cause, so to speak, that they're aiming things at us, but we don't know how to listen to them in a way that sort of, they are part of the community. They say things that are useful in other contexts. They bring useful things to light, but are sometimes in provocative ways or unfortunate ways. But yeah, so it's not cut and dry that they should, it's just the particular requests. Anyway, other people need to ask.
Well, what I'd like to address what you say, and thank you. And that is, this person may merely have what I would call a tendency to trigger interpersonal conflict and not be so severely traumatized that they have this particular thing going on. That may be the case. Also, please don't believe that because a person has beneficial things they offer to the group, if they behave really badly, we still have to keep them because of the beneficial things. Oh, for goodness sakes, that's a fallacy in my opinion, because we can always get beneficial things from a new or different group member. We don't have to trade it off. We don't have to trade it. A whole lot of people who are spiritually oriented and kind of metaphysically inclined and have a lot of self-awareness and are trying to change the world for the better, like you all are, and I am, tends to think, well, they do those nice things, therefore we should keep them because after all, they do those nice things. What benefit is it to you that you're getting nice things some of the time and you feel dreadful and don't want to go to meetings anymore other times? What if you stop going to meetings altogether and won't even go to social events with this person if it's a community? Don't want to go to meetings, don't want to go to the community dinner, don't want to play Frisbee with them. You don't want to do anything. You just stay home. Yeah, they do a lot of good things, but aren't we, the community, losing the benefit of your participation because you've withdrawn so much because of their behaviors and their effect on you? So in my opinion, it depends on how serious it is, how severe. And once again, Amanda, we don't know. We don't know what their causes and reasons are. We can't tell by looking at them. All we can do is try these things: extending empathy, nonviolent communication, ways of speaking, having heart shares or wisdom circles or talking stick circles, requesting that they change. Many raindrops make a flood, or the community eye in a graduated series of consequences. If none of that works, including Mr. or Ms. Fancy Schmancy, highly expensive outside community consultant, chances are we've got a person who's not able to change. And we can't blame them. They are innocent. They mean no harm. They've just had dreadful experiences as a child, probably. So thank you for your comment. Any more?
I have a question. According to one experience that we had here in the community, we had a case of abuse from someone that was doing a parallel private chiropractic and tantra, and then it turned out that 5 women were discover some kind of subtle abuse. And we had this, not that we all decided, but a core group decided to maintain him because he was an amazing fellow of the community, and maintain him here and doing the healing. But because everything was exposed to everyone, he could not handle it. So he left. So I wonder, it probably is not going to be now because of the time, but I wonder if there is also something that could be done to this person to handle the possibility of being in the healing process, knowing that everything was being shared to the whole community.
Well, thank you. Well, the whole public knowing something about a person, which is hurtful to others and perhaps shameful, like subtle sexual abuse to women under the guise of chiropractic or whatever, generally the person would leave once it's made known. And so I think what you're saying is there a way to give that person limits and boundaries on their behavior, but not hurt them to the point where they feel publicly humiliated? So once again, just like in my response to Amanda, there's things you can try. And if you try each one, and nothing changes at all after trying many of these techniques that I've shared with you today, if nothing works, then it may be that nothing can work, that they have especially challenging behaviors and their trauma is too deep and entrenched, and it happened too early, and it was too frequent, and their poor person is just like this for the rest of their life. In my opinion, they're going to get another chance multiple times, because I think we have more than one life. But that's kind of a strange thing to say right out loud, isn't it? Now you know about me. So in any case, having fabulous qualities like you mentioned, Zaida, I don't think can make the difference. So here's a thing a group could do. It sounds like in your case, this already happened, but here's a thing a group could do, is to have a small team, maybe called the Consent Culture Team. We have a team like that here at Earth Haven. And the small team talks about it and has one person go to that person doing those behaviors and says, I'm from the team, the Consent Culture Team, or whatever we call it. And we have had complaints about you from woman A, B, C, D, E. And we're concerned, and we want you to stop doing those behaviors. And we want you to stop them immediately. This is not part of our culture in this group, in this community. Please don't do this anymore. So he's getting the message, but it's not public. So he may, and I say he, but it depends on what the behavior is, which gender. So I mean all genders here. He may stay because he's only embarrassed with this group of 5 people or whoever, and he's only talking to one person. So it's got the most amount of courtesy to his privacy, but he's still getting the message. And at least everybody in that group knows that he did that. He still might leave. I mean, it might be too embarrassing or humiliating for him to know that these 5 people know about it. And those 4 or 5 women complained to them. And so he'll know that. So depending on his level of self-esteem and his capacity for taking in feedback and transforming, he may stay or he may leave. Okay, Fleur says, I can't quite tell what I'm seeing in the chat. Oh, Eva, would you send me the chat, like copy it and send it to me after
Yes.
we stop, so that if there's questions that I can send responses to you and Anahi to
Sure.
get out to everybody. Okay.
Yeah, I was just posting a whole load of links there, just so that people had them before we finish, because we kind of need to finish.
Of course.
It's
However,
been-
please don't go there yet. I have to work on it so that it's nice and
Yes.
clear and easy for you.
I will send you the chat, and you will send me a whole bunch of links, and we will send them out to everybody who came and put them on our website, and we will all be the wiser and the better off for it. Thank you so much. Oh, thanks for that, Anna, as well. It's a lovely workshop there on Monday. And thank you so much, Diana. That was super interesting and engaging. I think I can see from people's faces that we all really, really appreciated it. And thank you all for coming.
It was
Lovely.
lovely to meet you all. Keep on doing good work for the planet. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bella. Nice to see you. And we're together. We're connected.
Yes.
Mhm. Thanks,
Thank
Thank you
Eva.
so much, Diana, for everything.
Absolutamente. Absolutamente. Ja, jawohl. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Obrigada. Obrigada.
Thank you.
Obrigada.
Bye. Lovely to see you.